Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. I was kind of hoping for a little bigger introduction than that. And now a man with many years and much wisdom. Here's Clancy. It's all right. I'm his sponsor. He'll pay for it. I am glad to be here this morning. I'm glad to be, as I like to say, safe and sane and sober, because I didn't used to be, and I may not be again someday, which is the nature of this illness. In a sense, I'm sorry I missed parts of the convention because I've been in the hospital with my wife for a couple of days, and so I missed Johnny's talk yesterday, and I missed Vince's talk, and I missed the old timers meeting. But I heard last night's meeting, and that was really well worth it. It was an enjoyable talk. Cece, you're kind of a sinner, aren't you? Norwegian Lutherans never let up. And I'm sure we'll have an excellent meeting tonight and tomorrow morning. But the subject, what?
Turn the mic in front of you. Please.
All right, can you hear that? Yeah. I guess I'll have to start over again. No, I'm okay. But this is, of course, this is a subject. Where do we go from here that I selected because I think it's germane. You know, this is for those of you who may be new. Alcoholics Anonymous, in 2 weeks or 2 to 3 weeks from now, will celebrate its 70th birthday. In 5,000 years of alcoholism, this is the only continuing answer that has ever helped people. All the people like us who came before us had no hope, no chance. Hold it off as long as you can and then finally go down. Go to an insane asylum, go to a jail, die. And we are living in the only window of sobriety apparent in the history of mankind. There was a brief period in the early 1840s where a group called the Washingtonians had sobriety and had a number of members, but they left. And at times like this, it is sometimes thought, you know, AA has been a wonderful thing, but it was created in the 1930s for almost a different type of society, different type of group. And there's a lot of talk around AA. I travel around AA a lot around the world, and I hear suggestions and thoughts that maybe AA is a nice place, but maybe it needs to be modernized a little bit, just to bring it up to date, to bring it more in tune with the times. And it comes into several categories. One, of course, is quite obvious, is that why are we so insistent still that people must be alcoholics to be in AA? Should we not invite narcotics addicts, who's all one big disease really, or overeaters or food? Because we all use the same 12 steps. We should, when we exclude people, we are being selective, which is not the purpose of why we're here. And there's a lot of thought about this old isolation of alcoholics is really out of date. Another one is that certainly the big book maybe should get some changes. Not a lot, but some, because it's written in kind of archaic style, and it should be brought up to date, maybe a little more modern allusions and relationships instead of going on a binge or things like that. It should be brought to date. And there's a school of thought. In fact, at the last New York gathering of delegates, that subject came up, how we can change the book. Then there's also a school of thought who feels that we are being much too strict upon people who use prescribed medications. Because prescribed medications, we are not doctors. We may have some doctors in AA, but we are not doctors. We can't tell people what you can take and what you can't take and whether you can't take antidepressants and things like that. And it's none of our business what you take. We're here to deal with drinking. Another school of thought concerned with anonymity. Maybe at one time anonymity was important to protect people, but certainly not now. We have distinguished people. We have senators. We have movie stars. We have all sorts of people who have no need to protect their anonymity. They're not ashamed of being AA members. At one time people had to skulk around because they were alcoholics. Not anymore. And this anonymity served its purpose, really. And the final one, of course, was that, and this is an odd one, but it's really caught a lot of space around. Get rid of the Lord's Prayer, because it's a Christian prayer, and it scares off people of other religions who have a right to come to AA and find sobriety. Jewish people feel repelled by the Lord's Prayer. People of other faiths, Muslims, all sorts of things. And the Lord's Prayer is nice, but it's a Christian prayer, and it's had nothing to do with AA. And the Serenity Prayer is an indigenous prayer just to everyone. So, those are the 5 main movements now of where do we go from here. And I just want to talk briefly about them to look at them and see what they should mean. The first one, of course, why are we here for alcoholics only? Isn't that why do you have to be an alcoholic to be an AA? Because as they say, it is all one big disease. Alcoholism, drug addiction, gambling, food addiction. Do you know where that phrase came from? That came from a treatment center with only one van. Okay, everybody in the bus, we're going to AA. It's all one big disease. Which is a cute way of decrying it, but it really, you have to really understand and look at the nature of the alcoholism to understand why we have that rule. And the rule is there's never been any shortage of people willing to deal and try to help alcoholics or problem drinkers. And in all these years, there have been all sorts of therapies and situations and hospitals and psychiatrists and psychologists and social movements and all sorts of things to help alcoholics, always in vain. Now, why would that be? Why would an unschooled, dumb guy be able to help a college professor when a psychiatrist couldn't help him? And it gets down to the nature of alcoholism. I would say of all the alcoholics I have ever known or read about, one constant in it is that somewhere within inside of them is a little feeling, yes, yes, I know, but my case is different. And that little feeling of difference, when left untreated, kills people like us. It is estimated that alcoholics of our type, there are some alcoholics who seem to have the ability to stop drinking when they want to and quit forever. They go through a treatment center and quit forever. But our alcoholics of our type are delineated by the fact that we all quit too, but eventually people like us always drink again. Come out of a treatment center with tears of sincerity rolling down your cheeks, but you always drink again, sooner or later. And this is the type of people that have baffled everyone. Why are you that way? And in fact, most of us, I'm sure, would see my example of it, and probably yours too, is seeing someone in your family or someone who loves you look at you with that terrible look and, oh, how could you? You've done it again. You promised you wouldn't. The children were doing better. You're going to get your job back. And here you are drunk again. How could you? And the sad thing is I don't know. I don't know. So I just say, leave me alone. Leave me alone. Because there's no understanding these type of people. That's why they die and go through terrible times. But we have Now, what would make it different in Alcoholics Anonymous, or briefly in the Washingtonians in the 1840s? These are the only 2 organizations that have ever been composed of drinkers themselves talking to other drinkers. So what's the big deal about that? Because the great fact of Alcoholics Anonymous that makes it important is that I can talk about feelings and situations and you will identify. Maybe not specifics, but identify with emotions and feelings. I don't know. I was talking at our home group the other night, and I was talking about that phenomenon that I can look back and see in my life would change my life after slipping for years, of getting next to a man who, after a while, I began to think, my God, this guy knows how I feel. I had never met a man that I thought knew how I felt, because my father didn't, my employers didn't, my minister never did. Nobody ever knew how I felt. They said, I know how you feel, but they didn't know how I feel. But this guy seemed to know how I feel, which makes a connection. And I think what makes Alcoholics Anonymous so important is that in one talking to another, they can pierce some of that wall. Of course, there needs some cooperation for the guy with the wall, too, because every day I see people die where I... Really funny. That's really good, Karen. I'm sorry I didn't mention I saw people die regularly, because that's really funny. She comes from Ohio, where they're all dead already. But that's what it is estimated of today, with AA everywhere. It's all over the world, of course. And in the United States, it's the most. A lot of people think, we're in the hot spot of AA right here, Southern California. There's more sober AA south of Santa Barbara than there is in New York and Illinois combined. This is really the hot spot. Some people still think it's Akron. That's the heartbeat of AA. Akron has the same relationship to AA that Bethlehem has to Christianity. Something nice happened there once, but not for a long time. So there's no need for people like us to die or go mad anymore. What's so startling is the National Institute of Health, as of 2002, said that apparently about 95% of people like us die drunk, or as a direct result of drinking. A lot of people in this room are going to die drunk. I remember my sponsor told me that. I thought he's trying to give me a pep talk. But years later, when he changed all his mind about things and died drunk, he put an exclamation point on it. But why would that be? Why would that be? Because there are people staying sober today because they get a feeling of identification a little bit. Because, AA in the last analysis is this. It is one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic to help them reduce their feelings of difference at least enough so they will begin to take actions they do not yet believe in. And when that comes, that is the gestation of... And that is why we say, well, why can't we have narcotics addicts in? Primarily because they don't identify. That is why members of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1958, guys I knew, who were also addicts, got permission to use the 12 steps to form Narcotics Anonymous. In fact, the first group to do that was Sybil Corwin's husband, at that time Jim Willis, 1957, who got the permission, became the first organization to get the use for the 12 steps, and formed Gamblers Anonymous, which has become the most successful of all the non-AA organizations. And he got very involved in it. By the mid-1960s, it had grown, and his picture's on the wall like Bill Wilson's on our wall. And he got so involved that he didn't have time for AA anymore, and he died drunk. Got drunk. Funny, died drunk. But as they say in GA, he never gambled again. And that's all they cared about. It's as though we were in this room saying, well, yeah, he stayed sober, but he gambled again. Who cares? We were here for that specific purpose. But they formed NA, and some guys formed CA out in the west side of AA, LA. Some guys I knew formed CA and formed OA in West Hollywood, around Wilshire and Fairfax about. Formed OA, and all these groups formed. And why? So a person could go and hear identification. Now, the recovery process may be the same for everybody. But until you take the recovery, unless you find some way to get through that wall, you're not even going to take the recovery process. I got to identify before that. I got to identify this person knows how I feel or has had the experiences and emotions I have. I never really had an example of that. When I was about 2 years sober, I still did have my front teeth, and I was scrawny and thin, about 130 pounds. But I was making my move. And I had the zeal of a convert. And I was talking one day at the 6300 Club, which is the AA club in West LA, Wilshire, and Fairfax, on obsessions. Give a good talk on obsessions. Not the answer to them. I didn't know that, but I knew about obsessions. I could talk about obsessions. And some woman came up after, she said, "That's just wonderful. I've never heard anybody describe those things. Could you come and talk to we have a new organization over in Olympic Boulevard at our Christ the King Church. We call it Overeaters Anonymous. Could you come over and talk for us?" I said, "Sure, I'll be glad to do it." He said, "Sunday afternoon?" "Sure." So I went over there on Sunday afternoon, a scrawny guy, went in this room, about 8 fat women sitting around the table. Gave them a great talk on obsessions. Now, really, I could see their head go. And at the end I got done. They gave me a little applause, and then they had a little sharing session. And I couldn't believe my ears what I was hearing. Woman over here had made a 2-level cake for her son's birthday. And her husband went down to Long Beach to the military school to pick him up and brought him back. And she tasted it to make sure it was just right. And she had another taste. By the time they got back, the cake was gone. I didn't say anything because I'm too nice a man, but I thought, why don't you just have a piece of cake, you bag, you know? Woman over here talked about her ice cream, terrible obsession, eating ice cream, and couldn't I eat ice cream? I'd go send some more ice cream. And I didn't say anything because I'm too nice a man. But I remember thinking, Jesus, I didn't want to be fat eating ice cream like that, you old beast. And over here some woman said that she ate and ate till she couldn't eat anymore, went to the bathroom, put her finger down her throat, vomited up, and ate some more. And my thought was, don't bother shaking hands with me after the meeting. Jesus Christ, you know. I could see doing that for drinking, but not eating. I've done it a lot for drinking. Come out of a bar and say, "Oh, the sun's still up. Shit, I gotta." Now, what was the difference? Intellectually, I knew exactly what they were saying, but there was no identification, so it just became an odd thing. And that's what you got to remember when you're trying to convince your family and think about alcoholism. You can describe it, but they're not going to understand it. If they love you, they'll go along with you, but they don't know what the hell you're talking about. And that's why they say, "Oh, you could certainly have one glass of wine with us at Christmas or something." They're not being mean. They just can't understand why that would be. Any more than these women, I could say, you could have one dish of ice cream. You know, they don't understand what happens. It triggers something. So that is the reason, I suppose, we should have alcoholics here. So when people share, they're sharing something that can be identified. I have 3 daughters who are turning 16 this year in AA. And I have a grandson who just got a first-year birthday. And I have a great-grandson who's 3, and he is either a potential alcoholic or the spawn of the devil. Crazy. Every day I look at the back of his neck, see that 666 is appearing. But I presume he's an alcoholic, and by the time he gets here, I hope he walks into a room, he'll hear people talking about what he did, and he gets the understanding of it, instead of some slick jargon. You know, it's an amazing thing. We have some very good talks from narcotics addicts. I mean, there's several, and go around AA talking, and they give primarily narcotics talks, and they're great listening. They're fun. But it's like a meal without any salt or something. They give great talks, but they sit down, and that's really good. But what grabs you is just some goof getting up there. You know, I drank a lot because I needed to feel good, and now I've been sober about 2 weeks, and my sponsor says I'm doing better. It doesn't seem like it, but thank you very much. I know that one, baby. So it would seem, despite what anybody might tell you, that probably you still should be an alcoholic to be an Alcoholics Anonymous. And when you're in Alcoholics Anonymous, you should talk about the disease of alcoholism. In Narcotics Anonymous, they don't want us to come there and people come over there and talk about their drinking. Cocaine Anonymous doesn't want to hear about how much wine you had. They talk about the disease they've got that identifies with. And of course, the nature of it, I just see Paul sitting there years ago, a man I knew in AA briefly, named Chuck. He he is kind of a strange guy in the 1950s, and he had the feeling that AA is too religious, all this God crap. And so he started his own little AA down in Oceanfront in Venice, or Santa Monica. And then he had meetings, and except he had taken the references to God out of all the steps. And then the central office, those meanies, eventually told him, you can't list yourself as an AA meeting because you're not using AA. So he said, to hell with you, and threw all the alcoholics out and took in narcotics addicts and called himself Synanon. And he, I remember talking to him about that, and I wasn't no close friend of his, but I mean, he was around. And he dropped out of AA, but there was a good case of it. He never had any narcotics. I don't think. Did he, Paul? I don't think he had never taken any when he started, and I don't think he did over the years. And he had rules and laws, and they ran this thing as a fiefdom. And finally, when it all came down, the addicts were out using drugs, many of them, and they found him in his daughter's home in Phoenix with a bottle of whiskey. Back to where he started, because he was an alcoholic who didn't treat alcoholism. So it really boils down to, you can be an alcoholic and an addict. You can be an alcoholic and an overeater and a gambler. You can twist baby chickens' necks for all we care. But you must be an alcoholic, and that's why we suggest again and again, when in AA, talk about alcoholics so the new man in the back knows what the hell there's here that it might save his life. The second thing, of course, they talk about now is changing the book. That seems reasonable. There's kind of stilted language, archaic language, and it takes a while to understand the book is not written as an example of writing. It does something that nothing else apparently has ever done. It describes emotions and emotional recovery. And it's hard to remember. Things change in the world, but emotions never change. Human emotions are the same today as they were in the days of Egypt, you know. When somebody cuts me off in the freeway, I might as well be the Pharaoh of Egypt. I'll kill your firstborn if I know where you live. You know? Well, I wouldn't go that far. Maybe the secondborn, but not the firstborn. But nothing is ever... What seems hard to understand is that these emotions in alcoholics mar our perceptions terribly. That's why they say this is a disease of perception, because I may see the same thing you see and see it differently. Because it's the nature of alcoholism that the reason I use alcohol is to change my perception. And when you hear it was an alcoholic, I would suppose, why do you drink? I don't know why I drink, but the reason I drink, when I have a few drinks, my perception of reality almost instantly changes. My relationship to the world around me almost instantly changes. I become taller and more strong inside, and they become smaller and less frightening to me. And if I could control that drinking, I would have used it all my life, except it's like atomic energy. Eventually it blows up again and again and again. And there you're caught in that terrible cul-de-sac. I can't live without drinking, and I can't live with drinking, which is the great problem we all know. And so the way out of that is to apparently take actions for alcoholics of our type, which may or may not seem to have any application at all to the problem. Why do you do this? An example I used the other night, a sponsor, you have a sponsor who you believe knows how you feel. You may do things to please that sponsor that you'd never do for your father or your husband or a doctor or a psychiatrist or nothing. The example I sometimes use is if my sponsor would say, see that wall over there? That's bright red. It's gray. I tell you, it's bright red. Looks gray to me, Bob. Well, God damn it, you act like it's red. Sponsors don't do that. They tell you stupid things, but not that stupid. They say things like, I don't care how it looks to you, apologize to that woman. Why, Bob? You called her a bitch. She is a bitch. Nobody cares. Go apologize. Sorry, bitch. I don't care how it looks to you. Stay on that job. Jesus, Bob, they got me stuffing envelopes for $1.09 an hour. I used to have an office bigger than this company, for Christ's sake. It's the best job you got. Stay there to get a better one. Understand you missed the Friday night meeting. Jesus, Bob, it's a big clique. We all get together, suck around each other, brown noses, and they treat me like crap. Well, maybe they know something. Go to that meeting. And this goes on and on and on and on, and have you do things in that stupid book and make amends to people who don't deserve it, and tell secrets to people you can't trust. And oh, God. And one day you look up and the damn wall is red. Then you have to spend the rest of your life dealing with dumbbells who think it's gray. And the purpose of the book Alcoholics Anonymous is to build a series of actions that allow us to do it. To me, now this is only because of my own, don't get cross to me if I say something you disagree with, because it's only my opinion. I don't understand going through the book line by line. I don't know what purpose that serves. Bill Wilson would roll in his grave if he knew about that. Chuck Chamberlain would laugh himself sick. Dr. Bob would think that's silly because he says it's simple. Because the book is not a piece of great knowledge. It is, but it's not an end piece. The book is a great cookbook. It gives us recipes. And for me to study that book night and day is like studying a cookbook. But God damn it, I'm still hungry. Yeah. This book is meant to take action, to guide us into taking actions. And people say, let's change the book. What part of the book? How should we change it? To somebody who's been sober 3 months want me to change that book to what? To some way that has never worked for them, but we'll do it, try it again? This book is the only thing that's ever been effective. They say this book is a miracle. Not because it's so well written, although it's not badly written. They used to joke was, a badly written book. It's not a badly written book. I've spent much of my life as a writer. It's very clear. I see it more and more now because I read it every August. I read the big book at a book study meeting we have for a month. And every time I read it, I think, God, this is really well constructed. Because when you read it aloud, you can't skim like you can when you're reading visually. But they call it a miracle. Why do they call it a miracle? Miracles, a cheap word they use in AA. Oh, it's a miracle. Heard a guy a few years ago said, I got up early this morning. In the eastern sky, the sun was coming up. And I said, I've been given another day. It's a miracle. Get up early tomorrow and have another one, you goof. Miracles have to be inexplicable, unexplainable. The miracle of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous is that philosophy has altered more alcoholic lives in the last 61 years than all other therapies combined in the history of mankind. That is a miracle. I would not want to be the one to change it, for my opinions. When I was new, I wanted to change parts of it that I thought were just stupid. Those stupid parts saved my life. So I don't think we have to worry much. They changed the stories in the back. That's okay. Who cares? They're just opinions. The 164 pages are the textbook, and I think I certainly will spend the rest of my life defending that book against change if I can help it. Then they have there's still this thing about anonymity. What's the big deal about anonymity? Isn't it just kind of overblown? And at one time, perhaps in the 1930s, maybe in the 1940s, anonymity was designed to protect people from the obloquy of being an alcoholic. But that long ago changed. Because over a period of time, something has evolved out of that is much more important. That the principle of anonymity is really a spiritual asset to our lives. In fact, Bill Wilson's last letter before he died. Let me read. The last letter before he died stated that to whatever we do, let's not give up our anonymity. It's the greatest spiritual possession we have. Because it is a surrender of our egos to the ultimate whole. When I was first sober, there was a woman named Lillian Roth who wrote a book called I'll Cry Tomorrow, made a movie of it. And they said, Lillian, you shouldn't say you were in AA. Oh, she said, I'm going to help AA because I'm a famous singer, and they'll know I'm in AA. And a couple of years later, when she was face down in Palm Springs, drunk and throwing up on her pills on the table, it probably didn't help AA much, but I don't think it ever hurt any AA. Out in about a year later, out in Malibu, John Barrymore's daughter, Diana Duff Barrymore, wrote a book about her experiences, about how much AA had helped her. She'd even gone further. AA now allowed her to have a glass of wine with dinner. So when she died drunk in the Malibu jail, people didn't pay much attention. But again and again over the years, I've never seen a case or anyone breaking their anonymity publicly who profits from it. Now, why would that be? Do you think God is punishing them? I don't think so. I don't think that's the purpose of it. I think the spiritual concept of AA is this. As far as I can tell, it's oversimplified perhaps, if you can straighten me out later. But I've been given a great deal of help from AA. When I go public and say, I'm an AA member, I am now helping AA. I'm changing our relationship. AA is now kind of subservient to my big deal help. And after that, there's nothing over me except me. Now, anonymity is misunderstood much of the time. Some people, don't give your last name. Don't do anything. Don't tell another member who you are. That's overdone. Give me a call. I'm in the book. My name is Jim. Yeah. Here's what anonymity means. Anonymity means do not use your last name at the level of press, radio, films, or television, or public media for your own exploitation or for any other reason. That's all. Because of the nature of my work, I've had a lot of publicity in the Los Angeles Times and the Reader's Digest, and I'm on television a lot being interviewed and so on. And they interview me as a recovered alcoholic, which I am. And people say, oh, you see, you broke your anonymity. No, I'm not. I'm Clancy Imislund. I'm a recovered alcoholic. That's how I can talk knowledgeably on these subjects. However, I must never mention I'm a member of AA. When I say I'm an AA, you may no longer see my face. You may no longer know my name. There's no public AA. I don't know if any of you remember in the year 2000, they had this A&E, did this thing on AA. Really was great, went all over the world, and they had 4 spokesmen. I was one of them. Perhaps now you remember me. But that's what it means. And within the groups, people maintain their anonymity. I never understood that. Dr. Bob, our co-founder, always said he felt maintaining anonymity within the group is as much a tradition violation as breaking it outside the group. We're not trying to... Why be anonymous inside of Alcoholics Anonymous? That's not... The reason for anonymity is for me to keep from using myself for exploitation. It doesn't do that inside the group. People say, why do you say your last name when you introduce yourself? I've been doing that since I was sober because that's what I was told to do when I was first sober. And I just think that anonymity is a great spiritual help for all of us. It is the ultimate sublimation of self. You can't ever rise above much when you're just... And one of the great aspects of AA is that you feel part of something greater than you when you are surrendering your ego. And most of us have terrible egos to surrender. But it really helps. So I think that anonymity is something we have to keep and use it right and use it well. But we must maintain, when people break their anonymity, something happens to them. I don't know what it is, but they never have ever seen anyone. In 1972, McGovern finally was losing the election, so he announced he was a member of AA. And that was the end of him, I hope. I'm not judging him. Just reporting. But, yeah. Then there's this talk about medication. That is really a hot spot in AA. There are people who say, if you take an aspirin, raise your hand. And there are other people who say, I'm going to get my cake if I can find the podium. Really big extremes. Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? I sometimes find you misunderstand me when I talk about this. I would never tell anyone to stop taking their medications. Ever, ever. That is between you and your doctor and your God or wherever it is. But I do when people come to me and they are on medications. I tried to find out what they are, and we talked to them why they are taking them. Perhaps the most apparently innocuous and among the most lethal are antidepressants, because they more and more we're getting reports, medical reports, how long-term use lead to terrible depression and suicide, teenage suicide. A few months ago, the big article on teenage suicide from antidepressants and so on. That doesn't mean every time you take an antidepressant, you're going to whip out a gun and blow your head off. But these medications are designed, as most doctors will tell you, for short-term use. There's never been any study of the long-term use, and the long-term use seems to be very negative. You'll say, okay, I'll take it for the short-term. But the trouble is, for people like us, they become addictive. And they say, well, how can you be addicted to that? How can you be addicted to alcohol? It isn't addictive, unless you're addictive. Then you know, I can be addicted to chocolate sodas if I get enough of them. And so I always tell people who are on antidepressants, you don't have to do this, it's just me. I say, let's go to your doctor and see if we can't start you wean you off. Because I'll tell you, you can't take them right off. If you want to know how strong they are, take somebody off Prozac or one of these Zoloft or something right away, and they go goofy, like coming off hard drugs. Wean off. We've weaned several people off, and they're very glad about it. Of course, the argument for much of the medication is this thing called bipolar condition, which is an odd thing. Once they had a pill for it, everybody caught it. Now, I'm not at all putting. I know there are cases of bipolarism, no question about it. It's another name, as I believe, for manic depression, a traditional mental illness. I was classified as a manic depressive. I was classified as a schizophrenic, which was really... When I went to the Texas Insane Asylum one time on a trumped-up charge of suicide, you should have been around in the old days. You could have been our ward nurse. Anyway... They talked to me and discovered I was seriously mentally ill, called me a schizophrenic with paranoid tendencies. And I've thought about that a lot. And I'd have to take medication for the rest of my life. And I thought about that later. You know, that's what a bad diagnosis. I'll just go back and find this doctor someday. He must be about 90 years old now. Because if I could, schizophrenic implying dual personality. If I could have got my personalities down to 2, I'd have been all right. My problem has always been this group that gathers in my head every so often. Let's get out of here. I don't think we can. I used to hear people today say things like, I'm not sure the program's enough for me. I think I may need group therapy. Not me. I just go for a ride alone in my car. That's what's so good about alcohol. Alcohol reduces it to one voice. Maybe a bad voice, but it's one voice. Why don't you quit your job and punch the son of a bitch in the face? Okay. But when you think about it, the point I'm trying to make with all this tedious story is that the early stages of alcoholic recovery are almost indistinguishable from manic depression. Highs and lows. Oh, it's a wonderful new program. I'm going to kill myself. Anybody who's ever sponsored people, you just, when the phone rings, you want to burst into tears. You don't know how you're going to catch them today. I don't think I need any more A anymore. Either I'm going to kill myself. And one of the great things is that going to meetings a lot, that's one of the great things about going to meetings. They'll say 30 meetings, 30. Not that you're going to learn anything. You don't learn a hell of a lot. But you hear little bits of identification that slow down those swings. And you'll always have swings because human beings have swings. But neurotic, childish human beings have big swings. Not that it has anything to do with us, but I mean... We say we have alcoholic emotions. Not childish emotions, alcoholic emotions. What are alcoholic emotions? I love you. You hurt my feelings. I'm going to run away. Let's get married. One of the great purposes of Alcoholics Anonymous and all its fellowship is to get us in situations where we cut down those swings. And little by little, all of us, most of us have done it. And the trouble with taking antidepressants for this, which I'm not saying you shouldn't, but is that you do nothing about the root cause of it. It cuts down, it takes away the swings, but inside you're still going up and down, up and down, up and down. You don't feel it, but it's there because nothing has been done to put out the fire. I would certainly hope that you would remember that these medications on a long-term basis are lethal for people like us. And you can take them, and I will buy them for you if you want me to. That's not none of my business. I'm not telling you to stop at all. But you got to remember, there's a price tag for these babies, and they're strong. In many cases, they are lethal. And so that's why sometimes people get overboard. We have some people in our group who say, don't take anything. You can't take anything. And there are other people, again, who are loaded in the meetings. Somewhere in between, there's an answer that says, some people need them, and they should take them, but most people don't, and they should work on AA to bring about the same result a little more slowly than you can with the pill. So I don't think we have to change our policy much. We just have to be a little more understanding and not just decry people who've been put. Because today in treatment centers, most of the treatment centers send out people loaded on antidepressants. That's how they get a cure. It's sad to say that, but it's really true, and everybody will tell you that. And here's a guy coming out of the treatment center, and he feels good, and he's taking his medication he's supposed to take, and he's feeling good. And how can you say, gee, you really shouldn't do that? Well, I try not to take it. It makes me feel bad. What's the purpose of that? And that's why you have to work with doctors and people who are authoritarian figures if they can. Some of them can't do it. And there are cases of true bipolarism. There are true cases of manic depression, a mental illness that I would never try to override anybody's medication on that. So it's a matter of something you have to think about a lot, though. You don't just pop those antidepressants like for something to do like a piece of gum. They're potentially lethal for many of us. The last thing, of course, is that why would we say the Lord's Prayer? Christianity is a nice Christian prayer, and they've been saying it in Christian churches forever. But it had nothing to do with AA. And all this religious stuff, it drives people out. Jewish people refuse to come to the meetings. Non-Christians don't feel comfortable at all. It really is a bad thing. And that is it seems so specious. Because that's been going on. These arguments have been going on in one form or another for 50 years in AA. Most of you never heard of it because they just come up in little pockets here and there. When somebody's bored, nothing to do, well, let's attack the Lord's Prayer. No, they don't actually say that, but it's nice to attack them saying that. They really mean that they think they're doing right. The Lord's Prayer is, when you think about it, is not a Christian prayer at all in the first place. It was given by a Jew to a bunch of Jews and told them to follow it. And the Christian prayer, again, if it is a Christian prayer, if it isn't a Christian prayer, you say, why can't we use the Serenity Prayer, which is a non-religious prayer? The Serenity Prayer is this much out of a long poem by a man named Reinhold Neubauer. That's the most religious prayer you'll ever see in your life. It is just, when you read it, you just reading it, you go to heaven. Just, oh. And they snatched out these 4 lines, and people like us say, see, there's no religion here in this prayer. Yes, there is. It's based on this whole religious concept. We don't have to be religious. Think about it. There is nothing in the Lord's Prayer that is not said or implied in the 12 steps. Nothing. A higher power, a God that understands them. Hallowed be thy name. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Amends and so on. But even the great point, to make any fuss out about all, it has nothing. Now, our meeting, my Pacific Group meeting, and our Pacific Group meeting, meets in a synagogue in West L.A. Every once in a while, the rabbi comes and sits in the back because he's trying to figure out how he can fill up his synagogue the way we do. And I notice when we say the Lord's Prayer, he jumps up and says the Lord's Prayer. He doesn't find it offensive, the rabbi of the synagogue, but some little snot-nosed 2-week sober Jew has been in church for 40 years. That offends me. Get rid of it. Who cares? Who cares? Love is the answer, we tell them. But here's the funny thing. Now, you wouldn't, if you were in any other meeting this morning in the world, you'd never hear this. But you're going to hear it here. The history of the Lord's Prayer in AA. This is dated April 14th, 1959, from Bill Wilson to Russ Carlson. He talks in the first paragraph, sorry for the delay in answering. Lois and I have been on this, going around the country. Now about this business of adding the Lord's Prayer to each AA meeting. This practice probably came from the Oxford groups who were influential in the early days of AA. You have probably noted in AA Comes of Age what the connection of these people with AA really was. I think saying the Lord's Prayer was a custom of theirs following the close of each meeting. Therefore, it quite easily got shifted into general custom among us. Of course, there are always those who seem to be offended by the introduction of any prayer whatever into an ordinary AA gathering. Also, it is sometimes complained that the Lord's Prayer is a Christian document. Nevertheless, this prayer is of such widespread use and recognition that the argument of its Christian origin seems to be a little far-fetched. It is also true that AAs believe in some kind of God and that communication and strength is obtainable through His grace. Since this is the general consensus, it seems only right that at least the Serenity Prayer and the Lord's Prayer be used in connection with our meetings. It does not seem necessary to defer to the feelings of our agnostic and atheist newcomers to the extent of completely hiding our light under a bushel. However, around here, the leader of the meeting usually asks those to join him in the Lord's Prayer who feel they would care to do so. The worst that happens to the objectors is they have to listen to it. This is doubtless a salutary exercise in tolerance at their stage of progress. So that's the sum of the Lord's Prayer business as I recall it. And perhaps you think that'll get me to stop. No. So really the Lord's Prayer, when you hear arguments, they had a big movement in Minneapolis, in the middle of Christian territory up there about 5 years ago, led by some people who should know better, but they were just bored. And the leader of it was a guy who was very persuasive, and he was getting a whole bunch of newcomers to argue against the Lord's Prayer. Fortunately, his sponsor lives in Omaha. Fortunately, I sponsor his sponsor. Fortunately, somehow the information filtered down, knock it off. That ended the anti-Lord's Prayer movement in Minneapolis. But watch out, it may show up anywhere. Once it gets to Palm Springs, they probably will try to stop it here too. But I think it's very likely, with all the changes, how can we even dare to contemplate changing anything that is the only thing that has ever worked? You know what happened to the Washingtonians? In the first 5 years, the only organization ever had alcoholic talk to alcoholic. They had 100,000 members, it was estimated, in America, without telephones, without radios, without nothing, just one-to-one. And what they did in 1845, they thought, we've got such a good thing going. We shouldn't waste our time on drunks. We should help all sorts of people. We should help people who take narcotics who are not drugs. Not heroin and cocaine today, but laudanum and opium. We should get involved in stamping out the sale of alcohol. Prohibition, that'll get rid of it all. We should get involved in politics. We should get involved in religion. And they all took a vow to really help everybody. And they went out and helped everybody. And by 1848, all 100,000 were drunk, and the movement was extinct. And that's a fact of life. You can get a book on that. A few of them survived. I had a book home a few years ago, written by a guy in 1861 who couldn't imagine what happened. He said, we were doing so well, and people just didn't have time to help anybody anymore. Funny thing. Is based on that experience, called to Bill Wilson's attention in 1945, that made him sit down and write the 12 Traditions. Because AA was dying out, and he saw what happened. He learned about the Washingtonians, saw how similar we were in so many ways. and wrote the 12 traditions, which are still a most vital part. We have to remember that the traditions, so often today in our groups, they just become exercises to see if newcomers can pronounce anonymity, or old-timers for that matter. But these are vital, and you want to defend the traditions in your home group, not because they're anything mean or anything. It's because based on without them, we dissolve. So I would think, based on everything I know, I remember sitting in Bill Wilson's office in 1963, and I was so enthusiastic because I got a chance to see him. I was in New York for the first time sober, and I was doing some work there, and I went up to see if he could see me. He couldn't see me, of course, but one of his appointments didn't show up, and so he let go and talk to him a while. And I did much of the talking because I was just so enthusiastic I could cut off my tongue later, and I thought about it. I think somewhere along the lines I recall, I asked him, do you think AA will ever change? And as far as I can tell, he said, I hope not, or something like that. And I guess he knew that until we find something better and watch it work for a lot of people for a long time, we better stay here. We better do it. We better make sure that we have a singleness of purpose, that we maintain our anonymity, that we use a book that has been so very effective, that we watch the use of medications very carefully, that we close our meetings with the Lord's Prayer and love one another. It sure will help. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. And let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.